Hello, my name is John Little. This is for EHS 545 for the University of St. Francis over the scope of Native American environmental ethics. Indigenous to North America, Native Americans have embedded a symbiosis with ecology, practicing a traditional environmental ethic which is passed along historically into modernity as their diminished lands, now reservations, reawake an environmental grassroots movement to remediate environmental crises therein. In the following presentation, we will discuss the history, the ethical foundations, current environmental issues, federal and state law, grassroots organizations, ask important questions, offer solutions to issues, and list our references. It is quintessential to understand the history of the United States and its relations to the tragedies that occurred to the Native American people, and why those tragedies have extended throughout history into the modern environmental crises that they face today. So from Columbus to the Pilgrims, the Quakers to the 17th century colonization of Chesapeake Bay, legions of Europeans immigrated to the eastern shores of the United States and pushed westward. And with that push came the flight of indigenous people who lived off the land in separate tribal communities. Their flight came in response to nefarious European practices such as unfair trading, the giving of diseases, stealing land, and killing many Native Americans. This continued push for land led to cities being built, railroad lines developments, roads and land transformations, expanding agricultural practices and deforestation to extract wood in order to erect settlers' homes, and a Republican government being formed. This caused more wars such as the War of 1812, the killing of more of Native Americans, and eventually the tragedy known as the Trail of Tears. Soon after, the closing of the frontier was acknowledged by California's gold mine rush. Native Americans were forced into public schools, forced to assimilate to a European New American culture. Eventually, small, separated, and scattered areas became tribal lands, what we call modern-day reservations. The foundations for Native American ethics are not explicitly stated. However, they are not vague, nor are they ambiguous. They are rather clear. I will use the court case of Chevron in juxtaposed application to illustrate the concepts of ethical underpinnings to show a trend. So what would these be? First of all, Native Americans have a traditional ecological knowledge, that is, in the past, present, and future. They have a biocentric equality view from that of Duvall and Sessions, that is, living things are equal in intrinsic worth. There is self-realization that if we harm the rest of nature, we are harming ourselves. Yet it allows for mutual predation, which is a biological factor of life. That means essentially that there are times people will eat animals, and bigger animals will eat smaller animals. There is an application to the land ethic from Leopold, that is, to value land and create a mode of guidance to create a land relationship, which reflects an ecological conscience. That's understanding the energy circuit and biotic pyramid, such as protecting predatory species. There is a utility of minimal subsistence use, such as the case posed by Gardner, that is using less carbon emissions, such as fire for warmth in the winter. And David Watson, when he recommends going back to the village, as in what Native Americans do when trouble comes, that's no chemical or pesticides used because they use subsistence, minimal use, in most of all their lives, from agricultural practices to carbon emissions. There is a key concept on preservation, that is a direct relationship between the loss of cultural diversity and the loss of biodiversity, which shows how connected preservation is to the Native American culture, which is best known by Leduc, who lists several tribes who encompass this concept. She states that we, the Anishinaabe, our forest culture, our creation, stories, culture, and way of life are entirely based on the forest. That goes to show you how deeply entrenched their way of life is in a relationship with the natural environment. There is a holistic approach, most notably known by Robin, that is that the foundation of natural law, that all of life naturally moves in a circular fashion. There is a focus of sustainability. It is perhaps the purest form based on indigenous technology that's based on concepts of knowledge, such as renewable energy, how to treat the environment, and so forth. There is a concept applied to the value system, such as harvesting resources that will not deplete them. And then there is spirituality and prayer. All these concepts go into similarities from tribe to tribe, since from tribe to tribe, whether it's on the East Coast, the South, the North, the West, the Midwest, they all have shared connections. This is why I will make a stretch to compare it to the court case of Chevron. In Chevron, it was an argument that if the statute was silent or ambiguous with respect to a specific question that Congress had asked, the issue of the court is whether the agency answer is based on a permissible construction of the statute. That is, looking at the historical trend of the administrative agency in a case over that time through statutory language and ruling and enforcement. If there is a consistent trend over time, such as in this case, tribe among tribe among tribe among tribe, all different and scattered around, yet they all share the same ethical practice, they all have the same construction of ethics, it is by pure clearness that the ethical foundations for Native Americans are that of biocentric equality, ecological knowledge, preservation, holistic, sustainability, and a value system. There are many current environmental issues that are plaguing Native American reservations across the United States. Those environmental issues cause environmental risk, which in turn cause health risk, which in turn create a negative impact for the economy, which in turn is caused by a cycling of environmental injustice. So what are some of the environmental risks? They include mining, fracturing, toxic dumping of hazardous, infectious, and nuclear waste, cross-boundary air and water pollution, that is to say that ambient air and ambient water coming from across the boundary of Native American reservations enter their way inside the reservation. It also includes habitat loss and deforestation, such as the clear cutting of trees, which in turn creates increasing chances of flooding, which can cause things like chlorella and pathogens to increase. All these environmental degradation causes increase the health risk for the populace of Native Americans inside the reservations, such as the consumption of contaminated fish by pollution, and such as exposure to water, soil, and air pollution. These all in turn can cause asymptomatic short-term health effects, as well as long-term low-dose chronic health effects, which can turn into things such as cancers. You also have at-risk populations such as babies, the young, the elderly, those with immunocompromised symptoms, and those with working jobs or occupations that are combined with being exposed to these deleterious agents, which causes a synergistic effect. That is the accumulation of more negative agents working at the same time versus being exposed to only one. These health risks and these environmental risks cause negative impacts to the economy, since in Native American reservations they have a land-based economy. That is to say that for the large part, their natural resources are directly linked to their survival. So when these natural resources are degraded, are tainted, it threatens their future economic prosperity. And this in large part goes back to environmental injustice. That is to say that they lack equality, they lack equal rights, protection, and safety that are seen in other parts of the United States where those are protected for their affluence. The relationship Native Americans have with federal and state government is unique, yet it has continued to create mistrust between tribes and the state, and poses threats to the crux of the Native American environmental ethic, that is, land preservation. The EPA plays a large role through the federal government and with tribes, through the EPA's environmental programs on Indian reservations. There are 281 federal reservations, which make up about 54 million acres of land. The Indian policy, which was initiated by President Reagan and the EPA, has a purpose to aid in federal activities that will endeavor to foster self-determination and self-government among Indian tribes. Tribes will be dealt with on a government-to-government basis, which works with reservations to assess pollution, implement control and prevention strategies, and aid in administrating grants. Hence, the policy sets forth the principles that will guide the agency in dealing with tribal governments and in responding to the problems of environmental management on American Indian reservations in order to protect human health and the environment. The EPA has a unique cultural approach. They recognize that the Native American culture is unique and there is a unique legal claim, that they are the original inhabitants of this continent and thus have a relationship with the land, recognizing it as a sovereign government by Congress and also the federal courts. They do this through a local perspective, recognizing concerns that racial minorities and poorer members of American society are shouldering a disproportionate amount of environmental pollution. A great quote from Felix Cohen of Indian Law says, "Like the miner's canary, the Indian marks the shifts from fresh air to poison gas in our political atmosphere. And our treatment of Indians, even more than our treatment of other minorities, reflects the rise and fall in our democratic faith." The Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Department of the Interior also have a large role. There is something called the trust. It is land property rights between U.S. and Indian tribes, which the relationship binds the federal government to a set of responsibility to tribes through courts and laws that are being used to ensure those responsibilities are met. That trust relationship essentially obligates the federal government to act in the tribe's interest when acting as a trustee for Indians and their lands through what is a great right to the Indian nation, which is the treaty rights, which are similar to international law. They clarify issues which would otherwise be co-assigned to nation-state apologists for interpretation. There is, however, a struggle between the corporations and the state. Such an example is through Exxon and the Chippewa. The Chippewa had to protest to stop mining near reservations, and then people outside the reservation realized that they lived downstream, meaning that the pollution from the mining is going to travel. And so the Chippewas' very cultural and economic survival depended on their ability to protect and defend the environment. The corporations and the states went to lessen the treaty rights of Native Americans to extract resources of their lands. This is in due part to the tribal v-state conflicts. That is, that the administrative and judicial decisions have complicated the tribal-federal relationship by granting certain rights to states, such as limited jurisdiction over certain reservations. Native Americans are challenging the status quo. They are affirming the reemergence of Native American environmental ethics through grassroots organization. That is organizing from the base on up, using peaceful means such as education, protests, demonstrations, and publicity. One of the key points to this, noted by Linda Robin, is the need for tribes to unify in uniting a vision to challenge state and corporate power. And that is because one of the biggest struggles is from the land-based struggle, where Winona LaDuke notes that the leadership and direction emerges from the land on up. So, if the land is being polluted and used and the natural capital is being degraded, that also affects the leadership. A grassroots organization known around the areas is the Indigenous Environmental Network. Their goals include encouraging traditional knowledge, encouraging respecting of the natural laws, to recognize, support, and promote environmentally sound lifestyles and economic livelihoods, to build healthy, sustaining communities, and to safeguard cultural rights and spiritual beliefs. There are several important questions to be asked about Native American environmental ethics going into the 21st century. First, what are the short, intermediate, and long-term goals that would make this productive and efficient? Next, how to stop external pollution. How to increase traditional ecological and biocentric views in reservations that have gone capitalistic. This plays in part with the next question. What future does the tribe's elders want for their children's children when some reservations have allowed gaming and casinos, which contradicts the ethical foundations and cultural foundations of Native American traditions? Would gaining media attention aid in the reemergence of Native American environmental ethics? Would those who watch the media even care? It is a sad but realistic question. We can only hope that they would, and we can only hope that the media would try. And what are the best ways to reach the media? Would it be grassroots? Would it be through talk shows? Would it be through education? Lastly, what methods to use to confront environmental injustice and increase legal authority and due rights for Native Americans and reservations? There are many short-term and long-term solutions to alleviate the environmental issues posed in Native American reservations. One of those is to accept John Cobb's alternative global economic system that says no to external waste. That means that no hazardous, infectious, or nuclear waste will be stored or dumped in Native American reservations. Next would be to apply legal expertise and widen the net of court use to control their own natural resources. Additionally, they should use widespread practice of remediation technologies such as soil and water pollution controls by biological means called phytoremediation. That is using plants and trees that are native to the area, planting those in areas that have been polluted, which uses the uptake process of roots in the rhizosphere, which extracts pollution and pollutants that have been in the soil and into the groundwater, and over time it can actually remediate an area to what it once was years and years down the road. Next, they need to assert treaty rights, which acts as international law. They also need to expel capitalist colonial practices and reaffirm back to their indigenous technology. Lastly, these are my personal solutions, which can be added to solutions to the issue in total, which is for the United States government to credit reservations with added land per year. That means with tax dollars incentives, each reservation would be able to expand on their land, given that properties near their land has come up for sale or are on the market as some type of real estate. This way that they can improve and expand on their belief system, which is largely in part based on the use of land. Next would be providing grants for pollution remediation, habitat revival, additionally creating additional laws such as enforcing polluters that are outside the reservation to curb secondary pollution from entering ambient water and air, such as what we learned about earlier with crossing borders. And lastly, increasing education in schools across America on Native American rights, environmental rights, and also asking the media to give more attention to Native American rights in equal comparison to other social issues. Historical accounts illustrate that the preservation of land is crux to Native American ethics. Sadly, the truth is that Native Americans have endured atrocious crimes committed against their peoples and lands. From their first encounters with colonizers to the present day, one thing remains true. They still face external environmental threats, adversity and injustices, which strains their environmental ethic potential, which makes their strife against corporations and states understandable. What remains constant, however, and what is reemerging is their holistic and traditional environmental ethic, an ethic purely built on sustainability, where values are accredited to all living things and those things are seen as part of their family, an ethic of biocentric values, preservation, and the utilization of minimal subsistence, where land value is quintessential element in their working ethic. Federal laws dictate more than state, but tribal sovereignty acts like an international nation. Yet reservations are still targeted by corporations. Through all the injustices, a reemergence is still growing in the shadows since mainstream media hasn't picked up their voices, where people are recognizing the importance of the sustainable practices of Native Americans. Questions remain on how to best alleviate the environmental issues in the modern 21st century. Yet one thing remains true. They are still here. Even through all their tribulations and their environmental ethic holds the answer to remediate the environmental crises the world faces today. The following slides list our references from the sources and the images that we use and their locations. Thank you for listening to this presentation on Native American ethics.